Whispers in the Jungle. It began with a body. Found face down in the sticky clay near the Thai-Myanmar border, the man had no identification. His spine was twisted unnaturally. A single bullet to the base of the skull told the story more clearly than any passport could. Local authorities noted the body with practiced indifference, another casualty in a place where life was cheap and silence was currency. But this death, unlike the others, caught someone's attention. The man had calluses on his hands, not the kind from farming or fishing, but from years of steady loading and lifting. Beneath his fingernails were traces of acetic anhydride, a chemical rarely seen in rural towns, but well known to narcotics agents across the world. In his coat, lining a stitched barcode, almost faded, matched a shipment intercepted months earlier in Saigon, high-purity heroin, traced to jungle labs that shouldn't exist anymore. This wasn't just a murder. It was a breadcrumb on a blood trail that would stretch across oceans. For decades, the Golden Triangle, where the borders of Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar bleed into each other, was synonymous with heroin. Thick forests swallowed roads whole. Warlords ruled with private armies. The opium poppy, delicate and white, grew in defiance of governments. In the 1960s, this region fed the world's heroin appetite. America, already entangled in the Vietnam War, was soon entangled in something darker. Back then, soldiers came home not only with scars, but with habits. Habits fed by heroin that traveled from makeshift refineries in Burmese jungles to Saigon, then by military transport to California, Chicago, and Harlem. The highway was invisible, but its impact lethal. By the early 2000s, many believed the triangle had withered, replaced by the booming fentanyl labs of China or the cocaine empires of South America. But death doesn't retire, it reinvents. And now Whispers in the Jungle had returned. Satellite images showed patches of land deep in Shan State cleared not for farming, but for building. Intel reports whispered of armed caravans. The United Nations issued muted warnings about a resurgence in Southeast Asia's heroin output, warnings drowned in the noise of synthetic drugs. But to those who listened closely, the signs were unmistakable. Then came the body. It didn't take long before whispers turned to names, one name in particular, Khun Sa, a ghost, they said, dead since 2007, but his network, his blueprint, still alive. From that moment, a handful of investigators began tracing back the chain. Each clue, each body, each intercepted shipment pulled them deeper into a mystery that wasn't just about drugs, but about legacy, silence, and blood-soaked profit. This story isn't about a single cartel. It's about an invisible road that still stretches from the misty hills of Southeast Asia to the cracked sidewalks of Baltimore, San Francisco, and Toronto. A road paved with bodies and built on addiction. And you're about to walk it. Welcome to the Crime Trail, a channel that takes you inside the world's most dangerous investigations. If you're drawn to the untold, the disturbing, and the real, you're in the right place. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think drives this endless chain? Is it greed, corruption, or simply human pain? Thank you for following this crime-solving journey. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the Crime Trail channel so you don't miss out on upcoming exciting stories. The General of the Golden Triangle. Long before he was a legend, He was a soldier. Long before the heroin, the millions, and the manhunts, Khun Sa was just a boy from the hills of Shan State, born in 1934 to a Chinese father and a Shan mother. His name then was Chang Chi Fu, but the world would come to know him by another name, a name that would haunt Southeast Asia for decades. The Golden Triangle needed a king, and Khun Sa became that king not through coronation but conquest. In the lawless lands where Myanmar's borders blur into Laos and Thailand, there were no mayors, no rules, only muscle. Khun Sa built his empire from the mountains, recruiting tribal fighters, bribing border guards, and creating one of the most sophisticated heroin operations the world had ever seen. His private army, the Shan United Army, numbered over 20,000 at its peak. But its most potent weapon wasn't the rifles, it was control. Control of the poppy fields, control of the labs, control of the caravan routes that wound through mountain passes like veins through flesh. To locals, he was part warlord, part protector. Schools and clinics were built in his name, roads too. He paid villagers to farm poppies and punished those who stole. To the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, he was the king of heroin, the man who supplied over 60% of America's heroin in the 1980s. The irony. For years, Khun Sa played both sides. He offered the U.S. a deal in 1971, $50 million in exchange for destroying his own crops. Washington declined, and while the world was busy fighting communism, Khun Sa grew stronger, richer, more entrenched. He moved heroin by mule, by truck, by riverboat. His labs were mobile, hidden in caves, guarded by militias. Each shipment out of his jungle refineries was like a ghost. No fingerprints, no witnesses. Just high-grade number 4 heroin making its way to Hong Kong, then New York, Los Angeles, or Vancouver. By the 1990s, pressure mounted. International sanctions, joint operations with Thai commandos, and yet Khun Sa remained untouched. He moved freely between his hideouts, shielded by loyalty and fear. Even the Burmese junta, notoriously brutal, hesitated to confront him. And then, in a move no one saw coming, he surrendered. But not like a criminal, like a statesman. In 1996, Khun Sa handed himself over to the Myanmar government, not in chains, but on his terms. He was allowed to retire in Yangon, where he lived in a luxury compound under military protection until his death in 2007. Never extradited, never imprisoned. A war criminal to some, a national figure to others. But though Khun Sa was gone, his infrastructure endured. The lieutenants he trained, the smuggling paths he paved, the loyalty he bought with bullets and bread. These would outlive him. And in the years after his death, as methamphetamines began flooding out of the same jungles, the heroin network he built began to stir again, this time in silence. Some say the ghost of Khun Sa still lingers in the trees, that the old general never really left, that his empire simply changed names, changed flags, but kept the same bloodline. And in this trail, we're following from mountain graveyards to urban morgues. His fingerprints are still visible. The king is dead, but the kingdom, it still breathes. In the deepest folds of the Shan Hills, a ritual unfolds. It begins at dawn when the mist still clings to the leaves like sweat on skin. Farmers barefoot and silent walk among the poppies, tall, delicate stalks, crowned with pods the color of dried jade. With a blade sharpened to a whisper, they score each bulb just deep enough to bleed. By sunset, the pods weep a thick brown sap opium raw and unfiltered. It is scraped off with flattened spoons, collected into dark, gummy bricks. The smell is earthy, like wet leaves and rot. But this mud-colored resin holds the seed of a transformation that will eventually become 1,000 invisible deaths. It's here in the shadows of these hills that heroin is born. The process is deceptively simple and chillingly efficient. The raw opium is dissolved in boiling water and lime, filtered to remove impurities, then treated with ammonium chloride to extract morphine base. What remains is a paste off-white, foul-smelling sticky. The paste is dried ground and packed for the next stage. That's where the real alchemy begins. Deep in the jungle, hidden from drones and satellites, mobile labs operate under tarpaulins disguised as rice sheds or charcoal kilns. With acetic anhydride, a tightly controlled chemical that often arrives through China or India, chemists convert the morphine into heroin. The reaction is volatile, acidic, and unclean. The air burns. One mistake and a worker dies coughing blood. But when it works, the result is potent heroin hydrochloride number 4 grade, a fine white powder so pure it can be injected directly. This is the heroin that once flooded Harlem, that built fortunes in Brooklyn, that tore families apart in Ohio and Alberta. The heroin of choice for traffickers seeking maximum addiction, minimum bulk. Packing it is a ritual too. Smugglers use everything from tea tins to shampoo bottles, ceramic figurines, to compressed floor tiles. One batch was once smuggled inside fake chess pieces. Another in pages of hollowed-out Bibles. In one infamous case, couriers swallowed latex pellets dozens at a time, risking death if one burst inside their stomachs. And yet they did it, still do, because the payout is unmatched. A kilo of heroin costs roughly $1,500 to produce in the Golden Triangle. By the time it reaches Chicago or Toronto, it's worth over $200,000. Cut with sugars or fentanyl, that single kilo becomes the cause of 10,000 needles. Some euphoria, many overdoses, more grief. It's easy to think of heroin as something that comes in a plastic baggie bought behind a gas station or shot into a trembling arm in a motel room. But before it was powder, it was mud. Before it was profit, it was labor. Before it killed, it was bled from flowers, tended by hands not yet corrupted. In this way, heroin is both a product and a paradox. It begins in nature, harvested like honey, but ends in devastation. It connects the most remote villages of Myanmar to the neon-lit ERs of Philadelphia. It moves through invisible hands. It thrives on desperation at every level, from the farmer who feeds his children with poppy money to the addict who sells their soul for another hit. And always behind it all are the labs, the fires, the men who know the recipe by heart but rarely speak. The transformation of mud into powder is not science. It's survival. It's industry. It's death with a price tag. And as we move along this trail, we begin to see the map forming not one of nations, but of transactions, of shipments, of systems built to move poison from one trembling hand to another. The heroin never travels alone. It rides with blood. From the verdant hills of Shan State, it snakes along jungle paths, carved by generations of smugglers, routes older than many governments. These paths have no signposts, only whispers. They wind through Laos, seep into Vietnam, brush past the Mekong River's silver skin, and dissolve into chaos. Every leg of the journey is a transaction, a favor owed, a bribe paid, a body left behind. Some of it crosses into southern China, nestled inside shipping containers labeled as ceramic powder or green tea. From there, it slips into legitimate trade flows camouflaged by global commerce. Other batches take the Cambodia route, hugging the Thai border, bound for ports like Sihanoukville, where cartels and corrupt customs dance behind closed containers. Then comes the pivot, the handoff to Mexico. By air, by sea, by courier, heroin from Southeast Asia finds its way into the hands of Mexican trafficking networks. While Mexico's Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels produce their own black tar heroin, the higher-grade powdery Southeast Asian variant, number 4, is still coveted by certain U.S. markets. It's cleaner, it mixes better, it sells faster. Traffickers blend the two, or pass the Asian heroin as Colombian to confuse investigators. The point is never clarity. It's confusion, and confusion breeds delay. Delay buys time. Time protects profit. By the time the heroin reaches the United States, it's often changed hands over a dozen times. The man who holds it in Laredo doesn't know the farmer in Shan State. The woman arrested in Atlanta has never heard of Khun Sa, but they are linked nonetheless by a chain of trust made of greed stitched together with silence. In cities like Los Angeles, Houston, and Chicago, the heroin is broken down, cut, and distributed. It's often mixed with fentanyl, now a synthetic opioid 50 times more powerful than heroin itself. The dealers know the risks, so do the users, and still the exchanges happen daily like ritual. To law enforcement, the logistics are maddening. The Heroin Highway is not a single route, it's a network. A vascular system with thousands of capillaries, impossible to sever all at once. Shut down one node and another pulses elsewhere. Seize one shipment and 3 more slip through. The smugglers adapt faster than policy can react. Some shipments go north into Canada through British Columbia. Vancouver becomes a port of entry, feeding the market in Toronto, Montreal, and smaller cities in between. There, too, overdose numbers rise. There, too, bodies are found slumped in stairwells, frozen on park benches, blue-lipped and silent. Each time a journalist asks, "Where is it coming from?" the answer is never satisfying. Because the truth is this: it's coming from everywhere. From ancient hills and gleaming ports, from village hands and cartel guns, from peace treaties never honored and wars never truly ended. The routes are written in blood. Blood of mules who rupture mid-flight, blood of customs officers who turn their heads, blood of addicts who didn't know this batch was cut too strong, blood of teenagers whose first hit was their last. And yet still it moves, because heroin is patient. It waits in dry storage, in cargo holds, in hollowed-out car frames. It waits behind fake front companies, behind storefronts selling silk. It waits in the systems we refuse to question and in the demand we've never solved. There is no single map, only trails, and every trail leads west. New York, 1971. The streets of Harlem pulsed with soul music, protest chants, and something more insidious addiction. Heroin flooded the blocks, potent and pure, unlike anything the city had seen. It spread like fire. It owned corners. It ruled lives. And at the center of this invisible empire stood a man in tailored suits and silk ties, Frank Lucas. He wasn't just a dealer. He was a businessman, a strategist, a man who saw beyond street-level transactions and envisioned a direct line from jungle labs to American veins. Frank Lucas knew that middlemen made things messy, so he cut them out. While America was neck-deep in the Vietnam War, Lucas traveled to Southeast Asia not as a tourist, but as a tactician. In Bangkok, he made contact with former military men, Thai underworld brokers, and allegedly partners tied to Shan drug lords. Through a tightly controlled supply chain, Lucas arranged for shipments of No. 4 heroin, 97% pure, to be flown directly into the U.S. using military logistics. The legend that followed became known as the Coffin Connection. Lucas allegedly smuggled heroin inside the coffins of dead American soldiers hidden in false compartments beneath their flag-draped remains. The claim was both shocking and brilliant. Military cargo received minimal inspection, and the cultural sanctity of war, dead, made the idea unthinkable. While some agents dispute the exact method, no one denies the effect. Hundreds of kilos entered the U.S. undetected, fueling a drug empire that made Lucas a millionaire before his 35th birthday. His product was called Blue Magic. Its potency was unmatched. Addicts sought it like gospel. Dealers fought to distribute it, and in a city already fractured by poverty and racism, Blue Magic turned entire blocks into open-air markets of desperation. Lucas moved like a ghost through it all, using family members as lieutenants, laundering money through dry cleaners, nightclubs, and even cattle farms in North Carolina. He drove a $100,000 car, lived in a mansion, and rubbed shoulders with celebrities and politicians. But every empire has cracks. The DEA, long suspicious of a new source of high-grade heroin, began building a task force around Lucas's name. Surveillance, wiretaps, informants. Over time, the walls closed in. In 1975, he was arrested, and in a stunning twist, Lucas cooperated. He gave up cops, traffickers, even his own family. His sentence was reduced. He would later serve more time for parole violations, but the legend remained. What Frank Lucas proved wasn't just that heroin could be imported like coffee beans. It was that war zones and diplomacy, grief and patriotism could all be weaponized in the name of profit. His story, immortalized in films, books, and court records, was not unique in its greed, but in its audacity. And yet behind the myth was a deeper, darker truth. Lucas was merely one branch on a massive tree. The heroin that made his fortune didn't stop flowing when he fell. It found new carriers, new routes. What he exposed was not a criminal mastermind, but a system so porous, so compromised, that one man could build a multinational drug empire beneath the nose of the world's most powerful government. Decades later, investigators tracing modern heroin shipments from Long Beach to Atlanta still see echoes of the coffin connection. Not in coffins, but in the principle exploit grief, bypass oversight, use the machinery of trust to deliver death. Frank Lucas didn't invent the Heroin Highway, but he paved a section of it in gold. While powder heroin carved its deadly path through East Coast cities, another version of the drug was creeping quietly into America from the South, thicker, darker, and no less lethal. It didn't arrive in elegant vials or polished plastic wraps. It came in rubber balloons, knotted fingers of black sludge, sticky, acidic, almost crude in form. They called it black tar. And its arrival would reshape the American heroin map forever. In the 1990s, Mexican cartels saw opportunity. The demand for heroin was stable constant, even as attention shifted to crack and cocaine. But the Southeast Asian product, with its global logistics and sophisticated chemistry, was vulnerable to disruption. The Mexicans didn't need jungle labs or airlifts. They had poppy fields in Guerrero, Sinaloa, and Durango. They had mountain chemists who could produce a cruder but effective version of heroin with simpler methods. They had geography on their side. Black tar heroin didn't require planes. It rode hidden inside tires, inside car batteries, inside the bellies of mules crossing by foot through the Sonoran Desert. It flowed across the U.S.-Mexico border by the ton, feeding western states like Arizona, New Mexico, California, and spreading slowly eastward. What it lacked in purity, it made up for in availability and price. By the early 2000s, cities like San Diego, Seattle, and Denver were flooded with black tar. Its appearance signaled not just a new wave of addiction, but a new way of dying. The impurities in black tar increased the risk of collapsed veins, infections, abscesses, and fatal diseases like endocarditis. Hospitals began seeing a new kind of overdose, one accompanied by sepsis, by wounds that wouldn't heal by amputations. The heroin was different, but the devastation was the same. And behind it all were the Mexican cartels, most notably the Sinaloa cartel, who saw in heroin not just a steady source of income, but a reliable fallback. When cocaine seizures increased or meth labs were raided, heroin filled the gap. Cartels franchised out production to small cells. They built local distribution networks across the American Southwest, using families, gangs, and unaffiliated dealers to expand territory without drawing heat. They didn't advertise. They didn't need to. Demand did the work. Black tar heroin became the drug of the forgotten, cheap, accessible, and lethal. It spread through rural towns, through native reservations, through blue-collar communities where economic collapse had already laid the groundwork for despair. Users who had once taken prescription pills found black tar to be the final step in their descent, a cheaper high, a quicker death. Unlike the cinematic rise of Frank Lucas or the mythic aura of Khun Sa, black tar's invasion was almost invisible. No headlines, no suits, no high-profile arrests, just bodies quietly piling up. Law enforcement struggled to track the roots. The product was too decentralized. One lab could disappear overnight. Couriers changed phones weekly. Cash moved across the border faster than records could be kept, and every arrest felt like a drop in a bottomless well. By the time officials realized the scale, it was too late. Black tar had become the dominant heroin form west of the Mississippi. The cartels had learned to weaponize simplicity, and the United States was once again caught in a war it didn't fully see coming. The Heroin Highway no longer belonged solely to the Golden Triangle. A new road had been carved from the Mexican Sierras, paved with asphalt, blood, and silence. And like the jungle roots before it, it fed on demand, thrived on pain, and left behind a trail of ghosts. The phone rings at 2:14 a.m. A mother in Ohio jolts awake. She knows even before picking up that something is wrong. The voice on the other end is trembling. It's her son's friend. The words come in fragments: ambulance, bathroom floor, not breathing. By the time she arrives, the EMTs have already peeled the tourniquet from his arm. They've used 2 doses of Narcan. He's breathing now, barely, but his skin is a sickly blue, his eyes half open, unseeing. Another overdose. Another almost. This scene plays out every night in cities and small towns across North America, and at the center of it all, heroin. Heroin doesn't scream. It whispers. It starts as a pill, a patch, a lie. It offers escape, warmth, peace. Then it claws. Needles replace pills. Hiding replaces honesty. And death begins to circle like a quiet predator. In West Virginia, funeral homes stay open late. In Alberta, parents take CPR classes not for infants, but for their adult children. In Philadelphia, entire neighborhoods become open-air clinics, where overdoses are so common that public libraries stock Narcan behind the counter. The faces of addiction are no longer what television once told us. They're not just gaunt shadows in alleyways. They're teachers, veterans, teenagers with varsity jackets. They're grandmothers who once took OxyContin after a knee surgery and never found the bottom of the bottle. Heroin wraps itself around pain, not just physical, but emotional. It seduces trauma, grief, loneliness. It thrives in poverty, yes, but it flourishes in middle-class suburbs too. Its victims are not weak. They are human. And its power is not just chemical. It's psychological. Many users don't even know what they're taking anymore. With the rise of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, exponentially more potent bags labeled heroin often contain no heroin at all, just fentanyl, or carfentanil, an elephant tranquilizer. A dose the size of a grain of salt can kill. There is no warning, no second chance. One hit and it's over. Paramedics now carry Narcan like firefighters carry water. They revive the same person 3 times a week. Some have started keeping a tally. Others have stopped looking at names. It's easier that way. Hospitals struggle to keep up. Emergency rooms overflow. Social workers burn out. Police officers, once trained to arrest, now act as first responders, counselors, and sometimes pallbearers. And still the stream doesn't stop. Families hold interventions. They check pockets. They pray. But heroin doesn't let go easily. It isolates. It lies. It convinces the user they are beyond saving even as they scream for help between doses. In the midst of this storm, there are glimmers. Harm reduction centers distribute clean needles. Community groups teach overdose reversal. Some towns have seen drops in deaths thanks to fentanyl test strips and 24-hour recovery hotlines. Survivors share their stories in church basements, on YouTube, in courtrooms where they once stood shackled. But the weight remains. A generation is being lost, not all at once, but one by one, hour by hour. Each overdose is not just a statistic, it's a crater, a ripple through families, schools, workplaces, a parent burying a child finding their mother cold in the kitchen. This is the true toll of the heroin highway. Not just the bodies left behind, but the lives hollowed out along the way. The siblings who never sleep soundly again. The friends who stop returning calls. The communities that learn to live in grief as if it were oxygen. And still every night, another needle finds another vein. Heroin doesn't move without money. And money, real money, never travels in plastic bags or under floorboards. It flows through wires across oceans, hidden behind shell companies, glittering accounts, and polished glass towers. For every kilo of heroin that crosses a border, there are a dozen transactions meant to hide it, to clean it, to make it acceptable to the world of banks, real estate, and global trade. This is the second half of the Heroin Highway, the part no one sees. The laundering begins at street level. Dealers collect small bills filthy with fingerprints and grief. That cash is funneled upwards, rolled into bundles hidden inside tire wells, or sent through hawala systems that have existed since the Silk Road. In cities like Los Angeles or Vancouver, couriers known as money mules drive across town with hundreds of thousands of dollars in hidden compartments. They don't ask questions. They are paid to move, not to think. Once pooled, the money is layered. Maybe it goes through a local casino exchanged for chips that are never played, or into a strip mall business, a nail salon, a car wash, a restaurant with no customers but plenty of cash. The key is volume and anonymity. Many of these businesses are real on paper. Some even pay taxes, but behind closed doors, they're laundromats for blood-stained profits. From there, the money often moves offshore, into banks in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, or even Delaware, where shell corporations flourish under secrecy laws. Names are hidden. Ownership is blurred. A heroin kingpin in Myanmar can appear on paper as a board member of a lighting import company in Canada. No one questions the profits. After all, they look clean. But not all players stay hidden. In one case, a major bank in Europe was caught knowingly facilitating transactions for drug cartels. Billions moved undetected, or worse, unpunished. Fines were issued. Executives apologized, but no one went to prison. The heroin kept flowing. In Mexico, former politicians and governors have been linked to laundering heroin proceeds through luxury condos in Miami and Beverly Hills. Their names don't show up in indictments. They show up in gala fundraisers and real estate prospectuses. This is the part of the heroin trade most people never see because it wears suits, not ski masks. It speaks perfect English. It files quarterly reports. Even charities have been exploited. In a notorious case, a fake humanitarian group funneled heroin profits into bank accounts under the guise of aid work. The money was used to buy cars, property, even a yacht that never touched water. For law enforcement, tracing this trail is like hunting smoke. Financial crime divisions are understaffed. Rules differ from country to country. And the criminals are no longer just warlords and gang leaders. They're accountants, lawyers, offshore specialists who build financial fortresses, one forged signature at a time. But once in a while, someone makes a mistake. An unusual deposit, a lazy wire transfer, a shell company linked to an actual address. And from that thread, investigators start pulling. The layers begin to fall away. Behind the LLCs, behind the trusts, there's a name, a signature, a connection to a cartel, a shipment, a murder. And sometimes that trail leads right back to a village in the Golden Triangle where a boy once scraped opium from a flower, never knowing it would build empires thousands of miles away. This is why the heroin trade doesn't collapse with drug busts alone. You can seize a shipment, you can arrest a mule, but if the money flows unimpeded, unseen, the highway stays open. Because heroin isn't just a product, it's an economy. They don't wear capes. They wear wiretaps. In a beige office in Arlington, Virginia, an analyst scrolls through grainy surveillance footage. Across the country, in a nondescript strip mall in Arizona, an undercover agent sips stale coffee waiting for a name to drop. Thousands of miles away in Bangkok, a DEA attaché shakes hands with a local general, hoping the gesture will unlock the next piece of the pipeline. This is how the Drug Enforcement Administration fights heroin slowly, methodically in shadows. For the agents on the ground, every case begins with whispers. An overdosed body in West Virginia. A pattern of shipping containers arriving empty. A text message intercepted between two burner phones. Each clue is small, almost meaningless in isolation. But together, they begin to form something larger. Something lethal. Operation Tiger Trap, Operation Paper Storm, Operation Tar Pit. Each name sounds cinematic, but these are real campaigns, coordinated stings to target the nodes of the heroin web. And unlike the drug itself, which is fast and brutal, the enforcement side is glacial. Wiretaps take months, informants take years, trust takes a lifetime. And it can all vanish with a single misstep. In Mexico, agents work closely with elite military units, some loyal, some not. In Myanmar, every move must be cleared through layers of bureaucracy, often sabotaged by corruption. In the U.S., agents find themselves not just chasing drugs, but fighting political inertia, shrinking budgets and public exhaustion, with a war that seems unwinnable. And yet, they persist. There are wins. In 2011, Operation Falling Star led to the seizure of over 200 pounds of heroin and the arrest of key Mexican traffickers. In 2018, a covert partnership with Thai authorities shut down a heroin lab that had eluded detection for a decade. And in 2023, a rare joint task force with Canadian intelligence intercepted a maritime shipment carrying $70 million worth of heroin disguised as powdered turmeric. But the victories are fragile. For every lab shut down, 2 more pop up. For every kingpin captured, another steps forward. And sometimes the ones arrested are only pawns, expendable links in a chain that snakes across oceans, protected by layers of language, law, and money. The agents know this. They keep files open long after trials end. They re-interview witnesses. They dig into old bank records, hoping that the trail of money once cold might still carry warmth. They study human behavior as much as chemical composition. Some burn out, others bury friends. A few disappear into deep cover, never to return the same. The heroin war isn't waged with bombs or tanks. It's fought through algorithms, wire rooms, and late-night knocks on cheap motel doors. It's carried out in courtrooms and jungle trails, through coded emails and surveillance drones. And in truth, it's not a war that can be won, at least not in the traditional sense. Heroin adapts. It shapeshifts. It finds new routes, new chemists, new names. But to stop fighting is to surrender. That's why agents keep going. Not for glory, not even for justice, but because they've seen what happens when no one fights back. They've walked the morgues, held the grief of strangers, read the autopsy reports of children. They know what's at stake, even if the world forgets. And so the DEA's invisible war continues quiet, relentless, imperfect. Because while heroin may travel in silence, so do they. It was never just about drugs. Behind every kilo of heroin that crossed a border, there was a silence bought coerced or conditioned. A customs official looking the other way, a politician's name scrubbed from a wiretap, a rural cop too underpaid to refuse a bribe. The Heroin Highway doesn't just move through jungles and ports. It winds its way through systems, institutions, and people with titles. The deeper investigators dig, the more they find not chaos, but structure. A web, vast, elastic, and built to bend rather than break. Start in Southeast Asia. Warlords like Khun Sa weren't just traffickers. They were political actors. He negotiated with governments, offered ceasefires, delivered votes. In some cases, he built schools where the state never did. That kind of power doesn't die with a man. It diffuses into networks, tribal leaders, militia commanders, businessmen with clean ledgers but dirty intentions. In Myanmar today, under the fog of civil unrest, opium fields still bloom. Militias trade protection for trafficking routes. Some are armed with weapons sold by regional powers. Others operate with the quiet complicity of military officials too invested in the profits to intervene. Move westward and the web thickens. In Mexico, entire municipalities are controlled by cartels. Governors have been indicted, police chiefs assassinated. In some cities, the lines between state and syndicate don't blur, they dissolve. When black tar heroin surged in the 2000s, it didn't do so by accident. It was allowed, tolerated, and in some cases, protected. In the US and Canada, complicity wears a different mask. Here, silence is built into bureaucracy. Prosecutors bury financial crime cases because they're too complex. Major banks process suspicious transactions, pay a fine, and move on, never admitting guilt. Pharmaceutical companies, once considered heroes of healing, were fined billions for opioid misrepresentation. But heroin stepped in to fill the void they left behind. Even global institutions fail to confront the truth. Reports are buried beneath legalese. Data is diluted. The language is softened. Transit country, informal economy, irregular actor. Rarely is the full scope named a transnational industry fueled by apathy as much as addiction. Journalists who get too close vanish. In the past decade, more than 30 reporters investigating drug trafficking in Latin America have been killed. Whistleblowers are discredited or quietly dismissed. Files disappear. And the few who speak out often find themselves isolated, branded, unstable, overzealous, naive. Because heroin is not just a substance, it's a mirror. It reflects the fractures in governance, the rot in institutions, and the real cost of willful blindness. The web thrives because it knows how to protect itself. It punishes noise. It rewards silence. Even international cooperation, essential on paper, is often undermined by mutual distrust. One agency won't share intel with another. Political pressures derail joint operations. Visa denials, phone surveillance, diplomatic interference. Every tactic is used not just by traffickers, but by those in power who benefit from the status quo. And through it all, the heroin flows. Not because it's unstoppable, but because those with the power to stop it rarely pay the price when they don't. In this web, there are no pure villains or spotless heroes. There are only participants, some active, some passive, all tangled. And so the question that remains isn't, how did heroin get here? It's, how did we let it stay? In the end, it's not the statistics we remember. It's the phone that keeps ringing in the middle of the night, the trembling hands hovering over a syringe, the mother staring into an empty bedroom that still smells like her son's cologne. This is where the Heroin Highway leads, not just to morgues and prison cells, but to empty chairs at dinner tables, to stories never finished, to futures quietly erased. And yet, amid the wreckage, there are lessons. There is the lesson of demand that the war on drugs will never succeed if we do not ask why the drugs are wanted in the first place. What pain, what despair, what disconnection drives people into the arms of heroin? Until we confront that supply, we'll always find a way. There is the lesson of complicity, that heroin is not just pushed by cartel soldiers or warlords in distant jungles. It is enabled by loopholes in financial systems, by apathy in law enforcement, by voters who look away. We are not separate from the crisis. We are stitched into it. There is the lesson of resilience. In Vancouver, a former addict now runs a safe injection site, saving strangers in the same room where she once almost died. In Appalachia, mothers gather weekly, not just to mourn, but to lobby to change laws to fund recovery, to break the shame. In Myanmar, a few brave activists still document the shifting poppy fields, risking imprisonment to make the truth visible. And perhaps most urgently, there is the lesson of clarity. This is not just a drug story. This is a story about systems, about silence, about a global pipeline that begins with a flower and ends with a funeral. The Heroin Highway is paved with choices. Every time a government underfunds treatment, every time a bank ignores a red flag, every time a country wages war without caring for its wounded, another brick is laid. But the road can be unbuilt too, with policy rooted in compassion, with systems that prioritize people over profit, with voices loud enough to disrupt the quiet deaths. It won't be easy. The damage runs deep. The trail is long. But if this journey has taught us anything, it's that silence is a kind of complicity, and stories once told can break it. As we close this chapter, take a moment. Look around. Think of the names not printed in newspapers, the overdoses not counted, the tears not seen. They are part of this trail too. And you, now that you know, are walking it with them. Thank you for following this crime-solving journey. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the Crime Trail channel so you don't miss out on upcoming exciting stories. The The storm fades, the sirens quiet, and somewhere, someone chooses recovery instead of relapse. Somewhere, the road ends or begins again, this time in hope.